All right, we are back for yet another episode of Beyond Barriers. Beyond Barriers is a podcast that's hosted by myself, Brian Gavin. I'm the co-founder of Wally and Wally, an accessibility platform. In these episodes, leaders and community evangelists join to discuss some of the challenges that they've had to overcome while navigating an effective accessibility strategy. Guests get to share their journey of successes and setbacks, with a primary focus on how certain things might have ended the overall strategy that they were on their journey of. So, again, my name is Brian Gavin. I'm the host of today's conversation, and I'm delighted to be joined alongside Jonathan Poole. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure.
It's an exciting conversation that we have lined up. I always like to ask to start off by just telling everyone a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the space?
Sure. I think my first activity in accessibility was in the 1970s when I acted as a judge in a competition. I think it was sponsored by Johns Hopkins on computers to aid the handicapped. That was the title of at that time. Mm-hmm. And after that, I pretty much did not deal with accessibility until the 2010s, and at that time I started to get really involved in the problem of language barriers and how to overcome them through digital technology. And I got involved in running a project whose goal was to provide a translation of every word in every language into every other language in the world. So we're talking about billions of pairwise translations. And so we basically took dictionaries from all over, and we integrated all the contents of those dictionaries, the knowledge about which word is a translation of which word, and created a huge database. That was my, that's basically what's typically called localization, which is often distinguished from accessibility as two separate domains.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I think of them as really part of the same thing, because basically, imagine that you woke up tomorrow morning and everything around you digitally was in, let's say, Mongolia. How would you feel? How would you cope? You would in effect be somebody with a disability. And if you want to you use a kind of modern concept of disability, it's the way the world is organized to create barriers against your participation. It's not something wrong with you. So the barriers of language and the barriers of digital design that prevent people with certain cognitive or physical attributes from succeeding in using digital interfaces, they're basically just two different ways of interfering with people's success. So that was, I think of that as my first in-depth, long-term, multi-year activity in the accessibility space, even though most people probably don't think of it as accessibility. And then after that project came to an end and I basically turned it over to other people to run, then I decided I had to decide, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I decided, my computer skills are basically rooted in the mid 20th century and they need to be updated. So I enrolled in a boot camp and spent 10 months learning front-end software development the way it's, currently done. And in the process, we had a visit to our boot camp by Sherry Byrne-Haber, a well-known accessibility expert and activist. And she came and she gave a talk about her life and her work, and the people in the boot camp told each of us in the boot camp, you have to specialize in something in addition to the regular curriculum. Pick some topic. And I decided, why not accessibility? That fits well with what I've done before. So I started studying accessibility, and at the end of the boot camp, I went into the job market like anybody else. And the first job I got was an accessibility job because of the fact that I had done that specialization. And then the second job, which I'm now in, is also an accessibility job. So for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been immersed in accessibility. But fundamentally, I'm basically just like a computer guy who likes to automate things. And accessibility turns out to be a great field. If you want to automate things, accessibility is a wonderful field to be in because there is a huge amount of drudgery and clerical work and repetitiveness in the way people deal with accessibility
Yeah.
to try to improve accessibility. And so there's lots of opportunity to automate. So that's what I've been doing for the last few years.
I have to go back to the localization project and ask somewhat of a comical but serious question, which is, were you scanning dictionaries and
Well,
digitalizing them, or were these online dictionaries?
we started with the ones that were already digital because those were the least expensive to deal with. And so we did a lot of that. Then we also, however, entered into a partnership with the Internet Archive, which scans books and digitizes them. And so we collected paper dictionaries and donated them to the Internet Archive, which in return scanned them all and gave us the PDF files so that we could work on those. So it was, migration from the low-hanging fruit, the digital dictionaries, towards the ones that take more effort.
Well, it's interesting, and having spent some time in localization efforts as well, much of the taxonomy and normalization of the data is sort of the biggest challenge in scaling and
Yeah.
reaching that goal. And maybe there seems, and you've said it first, so I'm not going to take the credit for the statement, but a lot of overlap with how accessibility has to go through a maturity state.
Yeah. I mean, accessibility has standards that are sort of adopted worldwide, and industry groups that work on those standards in a way that I don't think you can say is the case for localization. So we basically had to decide what are we translating, and that's not always easy. You think you're translating words, right? Dictionaries, but words. The concept of word is very complex. You have lexeme, you have you have compound words, you have lots of complexities in what a word is and how you demarcate one word from another and how you sort of standardize words across languages. It's a big mess, and so you have to constantly be juggling, fidelity to the languages with an effort to create a universal design that will allow translation from any language into any other language.
Hopefully we see accessibility solutioning move that way, where something that you do for one is easily replicatable. The other piece I wanted to talk about for a second, and it kind of ties to this replication. So you indicated that you took a lot of your background and then certainly the schooling and now direct roles in accessibility. I'm curious, the automation portion. How did you even figure out where to start
Well,
in that?
that was fairly easy in my current job. In the current job, I got hired as a contractor to do accessibility testing. So I was on the front lines along with 50 or 60 other people taking digital, mostly web products, and subjecting them to a whole uh, series of tests, which were pretty much prescribed for me. So they had test plans and test cases, and it's all laid out. So you do this and do that and figure and see what happens. And if this should happen, if it doesn't happen, then write that down. Create a defect in your project management system, and then sort of. So there's the testing itself, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's the record keeping of the results of the test. And when you added those together, you got a whole system. And I started learning that system. Uh, I got oriented. I got shown here's how we do it, and I followed and I obeyed and I implemented. And the more I did it, the more I started to see that it was getting repetitive, and I was doing things that I could prescribe as rules. And as soon as you do that, if you're an automator at heart, you if you think of a rule that you are following, you decide, hey, I shouldn't be following this rule. The computer should be following this rule. And so I started automating my own testing and record keeping. And one of the managers in the accessibility team took note of the fact that I was doing that, and we had some conversations. And he basically said, look, if you're automating your testing and your record keeping, we've got 50 or 60 people you could be automating the testing and the record keeping of instead of just yourself.
Yeah.
How about joining our, solutions team? That's what they called it, and doing this at scale, right? So that basis of several months working as a frontline tester was really critical to give me the insight into what could be and should be automated. And so, it was a nice transition into the role of doing the automation. That I started creating tools which are now utterly depended on by the testers in the accessibility team. They probably have no longer remember how to do it without the tools.
That's a good success when you forget the past habits.
Yeah, although it creates vulnerability because all technology can fail. It can sometimes evaporate, and then we could be worse off because we've forgotten how to do it without the technology. But at any rate, that's what I've been doing, and so I pretty much started emphasizing the record keeping part. Uh, But then I've been migrating into the testing part. So my recent work has mostly been on automating uh, parts of the testing that people do when they evaluate the accessibility of, of a digital product.
Hmm. So this journey probably has exposed some personal or bigger macro level challenges that you see in the space of accessibility. Can you talk at all about those?
Um, well, I mean, one of the issues I think that pervades accessibility testing and evaluation is the is the question: what is accessibility and what is success? Uh, and you have these sort of polar opposites that are often talked about, namely compliance on the one side and um, real, genuine user impact accessibility on the other.
Mm-hmm.
And um, compliance, we often say that leaders of organizations are fixated on compliance, and we have to work to try to get them to change their mindset so that they understand that accessibility is a virtue, something you can actually claim, as a differentiator in marketing and all kinds of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we ourselves, as accessibility experts, I think, are often very compliance oriented ourselves. We have to struggle to get ourselves out of the compliance mindset because we're constantly referring to standards like WCAG and saying, does this particular feature on this web page conform or not to this success criterion of WCAG? We're basically applying rules to cases like judges, right? And in order to get others out of their compliance mindset, we got to get ourselves out of our compliance mindset, I think. So I think that's one of the main issues that I see.
Well, how do you
In
measure good user experience under the umbrella of accessibility?
Yeah, and it's you're never going to get agreement on that, right? And people with various disabilities don't agree. Like they don't agree on, some people say if there's a decorative image, I want a description of that image, even though it doesn't give me any information. I want to know what somebody who can see the page sees. And somebody else says, if that's just an icon, something decorative, I don't want to waste my time hearing
Mm,
what's in that image, right? So, so this is just part of the territory. People differ in what they want, and some people think ultimately someday we're all going to have our own accessibility engines accompanying us, and they're going to make sense of the world for us, and to personalize our
mm.
consumption of the world around us. But we don't have that right now. So we're trying to produce, universal but uniform experiences and
Mm.
uh, build some personalization in as we do it. But it's messy.
So I guess the adaptation of accessibility and the compliance piece, because I agree, you see many brands that have a very proud accessibility mission statement to be WCAG compliant, um, and then you look to navigate the site and the experience using a Apple voiceover as an example just kind of falls on its face, right? Because
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
it's not
one of the things that in my previous job, I spent a few days sitting in a laboratory watching people with disabilities deal with the company's websites and listening to their voicing out loud what was going on in their minds as they did that. Basically observing user research. And one of the things I noticed was that one of the most common refrains I heard was, "This page is so complex, so bloated, so full of things that I
mm,
can't even begin to figure out where to look for anything or what the purpose of this page is. I can't find my way around. It's just too big, too too busy." And when you look at standards, you don't have standards that say it's got to be simple,
mm,
right? But that's a that's a norm that a lot of people uh, can benefit from. And I see all the time. I see people piling on menu bars after menu bars. 3 or 4 levels deep, and then 50 different items in the footers, and expecting somebody's going to figure out where to find something on a page like that. That's asking a lot,
yeah,
regardless of whether you have a disability or not.
I think, the understandable component it maybe is lost in translation, and maybe it just begs the education and why we're here today, which is the adoption of these standards has gone purely from a legal compliance standpoint to say, see, I have this piece of paper that says I'm compliant versus how I've in turn, and maybe I'm just kind of picking up on what you're saying, but it's like you can use standards in a realm to make something understandable, but is it, do you have a method to do that? So I think that's brings a really good point about the mentality that's been taking on, which is, oh, run this scan and apply a widget and or, do something like this, and it's going to fix it, when you need a way to look at the experiential side of your digital content. So I want to transition for a second, the scaling of solutions, right? So I think you gave us a very critical issue in the implementation, but how about when it comes to scaling? I don't know if you can share personally where you're at from a scale challenge perspective, or what you're seeing in the broader market.
Yeah. Well, scaling, I think, is really a fundamental problem, because if accessibility testing is going to be as expensive as it often now is, where a company will often pay a contractor, let's say $1,000 to audit a single web page. You can't do that every week or every day or even every month. You just run out of money, and so uh, you you have to decide: am I going to be thorough, or am I going to be frequent? And scaling would mean you're both thorough and frequent, right? If you could eliminate the scalability problem, you would test exhaustively and you would do it frequently, because real websites and real mobile apps and emails and documents and other digital artifacts, they change.
More than ever.
Yeah. And sometimes they change, minute by minute. And so it's just not even conceivable that you could do the kind of traditional human intensive testing on every artifact of a large organization frequently. I've seen organizations that aspire to do it once a year. Well,
Same.
a lot of things can happen in a year.
Oh.
So my approach is to say, look, you're not going to automate all accessibility testing, of course, but you shouldn't avoid automating what you can automate. If you can automate it, then you should automate it. And the sequence should be like this: start by running all the useful automated tests you can run on a particular artifact, and then correct all of the defects that are discovered by that automated testing. Only then, and then run the automated testing again, because correction can introduce new defects. So keep running, keep going through the cycle: test, revise, test, revise, test, revise, until the test shows everything's fine. Then you're ready to start the human labor-intensive testing. And if you do it in that sequence, there's going to be a lot less for the human to be testing, because a lot of issues that humans otherwise spend their time cataloging will have been corrected already.
Kind of sounds like
That
how
gets
you
you at
started
least
the localization effort.
Pardon me?
Said it sounds like where we got started, which is when you started the localization effort, you automated what was digitally available, and then you moved to the
Right.
manual. I mean, it's kind of life
Right.
in general, right? Go after the
Yeah.
low-hanging fruit, but it's very
Yeah.
sensible workflow.
Yeah.
So, in your 6-year journey, what was the biggest success or setback you've had?
Biggest success or setback? I would say, I think the thing that I'm happiest with is
Yeah.
is the project that I am currently still working on, called Testaro, Testaro, which is it's a project that leverages the work of currently 10 different teams around the world that have spent countless hours creating automated accessibility tests, batteries of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are teams at IBM, there are teams at the Utah State University, teams at University of Lisbon, at Princeton, at commercial companies like Site Improve and Squiz Labs and DQ, and they have produced batteries of accessibility tests. And when I've done research on what those tests discover, to my surprise, I found that they discover some of the same things, but a lot of different things. In other words, even though they may be allegedly comprehensive accessibility testing systems, they really test for a lot of different things. And so every time you add a new tool to your to your toolbox, you're actually just adding more capability to discover accessibility issues. And so I wound up creating a kind of super tool. That's what Testaro is. It collects and runs the approximately 1,000 different accessibility tests created by 10 different tools, created by 10 different teams out there, and runs them all together and produces a single integrated report from them. And so I have, I've been happy with the results, but there's still a ton of work to do. So it's still early in the development process, but I've managed to, present papers at international conferences on this work, and CVS Health, my current employer, has agreed to take this product and contribute it as an open source product, so anyone in the world can use it instead of treating it like intellectual property or trade secrets. And I have to say, it's a struggle sometimes for the people who run large corporations to understand the wisdom and the actual profitability of giving software away. But it hasn't been a big struggle.
Make the world a better place.
And they have, in fact, we have a whole body of accessibility software, which is now, CVS is now open sourced. So this is one of those products. And so that, I would say that's the biggest thing that I've done. It was a gamble, to put a lot of time into doing this, but I think it's paying off. And so I'm happy about that result.
Yeah, that's a feel good moment. So before we wrap up, I want to get your take on what are the biggest disruptors coming to accessibility.
Well, you're asking me to forecast the future, which of course nobody can do, but everybody seems to think that it's AI, artificial intelligence, right? That's the big disruptor that everybody's talking about. And of course, when everybody's talking about something, I'm skeptical that it deserves as much attention as it's getting. But in fact, artificial intelligence has been part of computer science for decades, and it's just becoming more. People are becoming more aware of it now, but it's been, it's been a long development process, and it's going to keep on being a development process. What I'm anticipating is that all the people who are automating accessibility testing and accessibility remediation, correction, improvement, and assistive technology to help individuals, they're going to be figuring out little by little as they go along where they can successfully inject artificial intelligence into the products that they're creating. They're going to try a lot of options. They're going to find a lot of them don't work or don't work well enough yet, but some of them will. And so they're going to be doing all this, and my sort of approach to that is to say, okay, I've got my super tool, and it's integrating 10 different tools. The people who make those tools are going to be injecting AI little by little into their tools. I don't have to do it. It's just going to automatically become part of my super tool. So I'm sort of I'm not panicking over AI, but I don't think of it as a disruptor so much as just a sort of normal
Accelerator.
kind of progress.
Yeah.
We've been, using rules and heuristics and machine learning for a long time, and we're going to keep on doing it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like with Testaro, will you be able to better compare the results of one audit to another and predict what issues someone may have in the future? Like, is there any application at really a rapid scale there for Testaro?
Yeah, that sort of quality control aspect is a major part of what I'm currently working on, and it's a long struggle to do that because when you get all these different tools saying, "Hey, I found an accessibility defect. Here it is," they're calling them by different names. They're identifying the elements that are problematic in different ways with different types of location. Just saying, hey, just deciding this defect found by this tool is the same one as that defect found by that tool. That's work to figure out how to automatically make those comparisons. That's work, but it's work that has to be part of a project like this. So that's part of what I'm doing, and it won't be instant.
Yeah.
But I think eventually one of the things it will do will be to allow people to say, okay, this tool found this. That tool should have been able to find it, claimed it could find that kind of thing, didn't find it. Why not? And so it'll help to allow people to give feedback to the tool makers so that the tool makers can make improvements in their own tools. It's almost like a kind of marketplace in which the tools can compete, but you have to have comparability capabilities, right, to make that possible.
Wow. A really exciting and interesting conversation. And it kind of just one thing that stuck with me from the beginning is, your exposure back in the 70s when you said the mission was for computers to aid the handicap. And further, we discussed about how everyone has their own accessibility engine or model because we all consume differently. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what this is at the heart of. So you've brought full visibility or closure to the conversation. I always like to leave a minute or for you to wrap up and share anything that we didn't get to talk about or mention anything before we cut out for today.
I thought your questions have been terrific, and it's not clear that they've left any major holes for me to try to fill here at the end. Yeah, I think a lot of people might ask, is accessibility a good field to be in? Some people have claimed recently that accessibility is going to be dying as a field in the next decade or two because nobody will need to make any products accessible. Assistive technologies will make them accessible for each individual user. So I don't know. I would say for me, accessibility is sort of part of good design and good implementation. It's part of conforming to shared standards. It's part of making your interfaces predictable. And so, it's not, a lot of people think of it as a niche field. I think of it as core, not niche. And so if you're thinking, should I get into accessibility? I would say you can't really lose. You're gonna be, your quality of what you do will be better as a result of focusing on accessibility.
Very good. Well, Jonathan, thank you again. A wealth of knowledge, and very much appreciate your time. And I hope everyone has not just one, but many takeaways because this was awesome. So thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate the ability to talk with you today. It was wonderful.